They say legends are just stories until you hear the screams in the night, until you find the bodies drained, lifeless, left with nothing but 2 puncture wounds and a mystery no one wants to solve. Something lurks in the darkness, and it's always hungry. A nightmare with fangs, a creature that doesn't vanish, a creature that doesn't just kill, it feeds. Stalking farmsteads, preying on the helpless, vanishing before dawn, leaving nothing but fear in its wake. Some say it's an alien experiment gone wrong. Others swear it's a demon cursed to roam the earth. But one thing is certain, it's real, and it's watching. Welcome to Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast. Season 1, The Oleander Files. Episode 6. File number 369. The Chupacabra. My name is Michael. Join me here, where the truth is darker than myth. Are you ready for the hunt? The Chupacabra, which translates to ghost sucker in Spanish, is a legendary cryptid first reported in Latin America during the 1990s. It is named for its alleged habit of attacking livestock, particularly goats, but sometimes humans, and draining their blood. The first sightings of the Chupacabra legend emerged in Puerto Rico in early 1995. A farmer reported discovering dead livestock with puncture wounds in their necks and blood drained from their bodies. Shortly after, a woman described seeing a strange creature near her home. She described it as a bipedal creature about 3 to 4 feet tall, with spines or quills running down its back. It has also been described as reptilian or alien-like in appearance. Later accounts from other regions, such as the United States and Mexico, described it as hairless, dog-like animal with prominent fangs and a hunched posture. The Chupacabra legend quickly spread beyond Puerto Rico to other parts of Latin America, including Mexico, Brazil, and Chile, as well as into the southwestern United States. Reports often correlated with livestock deaths, missing children, dead bodies, fueling fears and fascination. Now, many alleged Chupacabra sightings have been attributed to sick or mangy animals such as coyotes, raccoons, or even dogs. Severe cases of mange can cause these animals to lose their fur and appear gaunt and unnatural. Some have even suggested that the stories of the blood-sucking Chupacabra have just been exaggerated accounts of vampire bats preying on livestock, especially in the areas where these bats are common. But the Chupacabra remains a part of folklore and popular culture, with ongoing sightings reported. Though none have been scientifically verified, cryptozoologists and enthusiasts continue to investigate reports, while skeptics generally attribute the phenomenon to natural causes or hoaxes. Though the Chupacabra is not as old as other myths and legends such as Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and is relatively modern, originating in the 20th century, it still holds a terrifying grip over skeptics, witnesses, and victims. The first widely publicized report came from Puerto Rico, where farmers discovered goats, chickens, and other livestock dead, with puncture wounds in their necks. They were seemingly drained of blood. And again, in the late 1990s, farmers in rural Mexico began reporting similar incidents. Livestock, mostly goats and sheep, were found lifeless with 2 puncture marks and no blood in the bodies. One farmer claimed he saw a hairless creature the size of a small bear leaping over fences at night. Panic spread shortly after, leading to some communities organizing hunts to capture the strange creature. The sightings have moved north into the United States. In 2004, a rancher near San Antonio shot a strange creature that resembled a hairless canine but had unusual proportions. DNA tests were supposed to reveal that it was just a coyote with mange, but they came back inconclusive. In Texas in 2007, a woman discovered what she claimed was a chupacabra on her property. The animal had blue, gray, hairless skin and odd fangs. She reported that it had entered her property quietly and took her granddaughter into the woods. They were both never found. Now, the chupacabra epidemic has reached much farther, from Brazil to Chile to even sightings in Russia now. One witness described seeing a creature that resembled a giant bat or a kangaroo. This farmer reported spotting the creature standing upright before it vanished into the forest. To this day, the chupacabra legend continues to grow. More sightings add new details or twists to the creature's description. And according to my great uncle's journal, the chupacabra has been here for much longer than we ever knew. Now, my great uncle Sam never complained about all these classified missions, but my father always said that his uncle used to say the best part about his military experience was seeing every inch of our great planet Earth. And one of his favorite spots was a small little village in the Chilean foothills. Whenever he got a chance, it was his destination for a much-needed private vacation. In his first encounter with a chupacabra, just so happened on one of these solo excursions. In the early 70s, he was on vacation at the bottom of the Andes Mountains, just outside one of the Chilean southern forests. It was one of the few times where he had more than just a weekend off. He spent this time bettering himself, reading, contemplating his job, his position, all the things he had seen, all the things he had done. And after decompressing for a few days, he went for a stroll and found himself coming up on one of the local farmers. He was surrounded by a handful of townspeople, and they were in an uproar. This man had blood on his clothes and on his hands. This farmer wasn't a wealthy man. He earned every penny from his farm. He looked absolutely miserable and horrified. Apparently, most of his livestock, a couple dozen goats, some sheep, they had all just been slaughtered. He pointed to the open fields and described their cold, rigid bodies, how their throats were punctured by something unnatural. There was no blood left in them, no signs of struggle, just death everywhere. Now, this wasn't the first time this had happened, and he wasn't the only farmer who has come across this. Now, a couple of the men took a step back and whispered one word that they all feared since childhood. El Cuco, La Flaca, the skinny boogeyman. Now, there wasn't a word for the chupacabra back then. That name didn't come into favor until the mid-90s. So my uncle, who knew it was probably a mistake to get involved, came to the farmer to hear his story and to try to settle his fears. My great-uncle Sam dealt with crazy stuff before, had seen horror stories, monsters, and what they do. And he knew immediately when he saw the corpses that this wasn't human. The farmer trembled and said, "This isn't an animal. It's something else. It's playing with us." One of the other men, who was growing with fear and anger, said, "Then we kill it." My uncle rolled his eyes, knowing what came next, and suggested that the men let him look around first and see what he can find out. At first, the farmer and the local townsman wanted to brush off my uncle's suggestion. But in that moment, the wind shifted, bringing with it a horrible smell. It drifted toward them, full of copper and rot. And that's when they saw it. Perched on a boulder, underneath the shade of the nearby foothills, just outside the reach of the morning sun, was the Chupacabra. But it was different from the stories that were told about it in the future. For one thing, it was tall. It was too tall, almost human in shape. But the shape was wrong. It was slender, its skin was slick, dark gray, with faint blotches of either patchy hair or dried blood. My great-uncle thought it's probably both. Its eyes burned red, its mouth seemed to gleam with inside the shadow, and it was too wide, filled with blackened fangs that twitched in something like a demon's grin. And just as my great-uncle readied himself, it moved, but it moved faster than anticipated, taking with it the horrendous smell that a cackled scream, like a sick hyena, seemed to echo out. This caused the panicked farmer and the handful of riled-up townspeople scattered. My great-uncle called out to all of them, "No, stay together, stay with me. We must retreat. Let's get back to the farmhouse." But by then it was too late. The monster emerged again, even quicker this time, slamming into one of the men who was running in the opposite direction. My uncle's first thought was, how did it get there that fast? But he didn't have time to react. The man screamed as his flesh tore. Bones snapped, and then the sound of a gurgle, like sucking, echoed throughout the valley. My uncle grabbed the farmer and one of the men by their necks and ran in the opposite way, back towards his vacation cabin. In a matter of seconds, the first victim fell silent. My uncle looked over his shoulder as they were running, and the Chupacabra had disappeared. He noticed movement from the corner of his left eye and knew that it was circling back around, and it was much too fast. And just as the three men fell into the open gates of my uncle's property, it appeared again, slicing at one of the tendons in the ankle of the farmer. As he fell to the ground screaming, my uncle threw the other man forward, raced into his property, scooped up the closest weapon, a machete that he kept behind the door, and ran back out ready to take off any limb he could to save the farmer. But he didn't move fast enough, as the farmer was dragged off into the distance again. His screams were muffled as he seemed to give way to the shock of the moment. And then from the vegetation from the side of the house, the screams began again. My uncle directed the other man to go inside, to find the CB radio located in his bedroom, and to call for help. But the man wouldn't move. So without hesitation, my uncle slapped him, bringing him back to consciousness. He started to cry, but ran into his residence, and as soon as my uncle heard him shuffling around towards the bedroom, he made his way to the edge and clearing of the property. And just as he got there, the farmer ran back out. He had scratches along his face, and chunks of his hair were missing. His eyes were bulging out of his head in pure panic. But when he saw my uncle, he fell into his arms and pleaded with him. "Run, we have to run." My uncle said, "No, I've got this. Now get back." But he screamed, It's not one. It's not only one. My uncle took a cautious step backwards, with growing aggravation as he wondered just how many were out there. He had an answer to that question within a matter of moments, as the original Chupacabra slowly stepped into the light, followed by 3 other ones. And then those 3 were followed by another half dozen on one end. They all began to chant and call in whistly gurgles, and on the far side of the property, another half dozen appeared, with more red eyes, hiding in the brushes and shadows. And without another moment of thought, my great uncle decided to strike first. He lunged forward with his old yet sharp machete and beheaded the first one with one violent swing. It startled the other ones behind it, and they scattered into the distance. But that only lasted just long enough for him to turn around and run. He tried to grab the farmer, but it was too late. He was frozen in fear, and then engulfed by 5 new chupacabras. They were different sizes, but all shared the exact same look, like a decrepit canine demon. Now my uncle made his way back inside his small cabin, knowing he didn't have the firepower or his team to back him up right now, which left him with one option. I think this is referred to as the foobar option. If you don't know what foobar is, look it up. It's classic. He slammed the door behind him, locking it, shoving as much furniture as he could against it, as the first wave of the wild beasts slammed against the walls, shattering some of the windows in the process. But he never looked back. He just slid into his bedroom, almost knocking over the bystander who was shaking and trembling in fear. My great uncle ripped the CB unit from his hands and immediately called for emergency backup. Now he knew, even best case scenario, a Black Ops helicopter was at best 7 minutes away, and that would be at least 5 minutes too late. Just then, more of the beasts ripped their way inside, and my great uncle knew there was no more time. He kicked his bed, sending it across the floor, revealing a hatch that lied underneath. He jerked it open and shoved the man down in the hole, and then quickly followed behind, closing the top down and securing it with the military-grade lock that lied just below it. The man had fallen down the ladder a good 15 feet of my uncle's secret bunker. He had broke one of his legs and couldn't move, and before my uncle could help him, he passed out from the pain. It was better he didn't see what happened next anyways, because my great uncle wasn't even sure if it would work. As the horde of chupacabras bared down on them, growing in a frenzy of the smell of fresh blood, my uncle knew the hatch door wouldn't last forever. He ran to the wall, typed in 7734 on the keyboard that was attached to it, and then pulled the local and himself into an old freezer that didn't work anymore, the kind you would store a fresh kill in. And just as the first pair of black teeth ripped through the roof of my uncle's hideaway, the dozens of explosives that he had rigged on the ceiling, placed strategically underneath his cabin, erupted into a bright, vicious explosion that sent a cloud of fire 3 stories high at the bottom of the Andes. As it turned out, it took the military 10 minutes to get there. But that was more than enough for my uncle to realize that his last resort worked. When a helicopter got there and helped remove my uncle and the still passed out townsperson, he surveyed his devastation. His cabin was completely gone, left with black ash and debris. And at last count, there were 36 piles of ash and flesh and monstrous bone scattered throughout the property. My great uncle and the stranger were quickly evacuated, leaving the mess behind. Days later, as the locals checked in on the town's farmer, they found that his property had been completely abandoned. All his livestock dead. Now, some of the locals tried to report the military presence that day, but obviously the military denied any operation in the region. And as for the victims, human and livestock, the official report said it was a wild animal attack, probably pumas. Now, my great uncle had hoped that he had killed every last one of those evil, blood-sucking beasts, but he knew better. You can't have a population that big in such a localized town and think they are the only ones. And weeks later, when another farmer's livestock started turning up dead again, drained, punctured, and carved, he knew this wasn't the last time that he would dance with the Chupacabra. Now, listeners, I have a surprise for you. Though there aren't many, but in my great uncle's files, there isn't just journals. There's a handful of pictures and just under a half dozen or so audio files. Now, he has no audio from this actual event, but this wasn't the last time that he or his team had to deal with the Chupacabra. But he enclosed a few seconds that was taken from a video recording that he personally saved. Now, he wasn't supposed to have this, and he definitely was not supposed to remove it from the original recording. But as these journals have shown time and time again, my great uncle was a bit of a rebel. This audio comes from the Mexico and Arizona border in late 1993. And I'd like to play that sound for you right now. All right, my fellow listeners or gardeners, I'm going to keep the update quick this week. There hasn't been anything much to report in the last few days, other than my phone's been ringing at odd times of the night. And when I answer it, there's no one there. And it only happens when the gray van is not parked out front. I don't know if the two have anything to do with each other, but I'm determined to find out. As always, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about the podcast in this new episode. The feedback and the stories I've been getting from the listeners have been great and make me proud to be here telling my truth, my family's truth. And as I get to know some of you, I hope to share some of your truths in the future. So send those truths over to the official email, ppgharvest@gmail.com, or reach out on Twitter or Blue Sky at Gardener Michael. I can't wait to talk to you. But for now, it's time to say goodbye and get prepared for the next episode. My next episode is very personal to me, and you'll see why when we discuss one of the most unknown and secret creatures that are in the Oleander Files. And I like to call this one Them Devils. As always, my name is Michael, and the names and dates have been changed in this episode. This is Project Black Garden, Season 1, The Oleander Files. And remember, monsters are real, and sometimes they've been here a lot longer than we ever thought.